The Hermes descended like a metal tear through the crimson sky. Captain Chen gripped her seat as the craft bucked through turbulence.
Atmospheric density is 3 times of normal. Gravity reading shows 2 point. Temperature outside is holding at 42 degrees Celsius.
Sarah had trained for this moment her entire adult life. The fact that the Chthari Empire on stars is made. The shuttle broke through the worst of the turbulence, and Sarah caught her first glimpse of the Chthari capital city through Veerpuri.
Final approach to the diplomatic landing pad. We can still turn back.
After 47 light years, I don't think so.
Maintain control. Gravity reading shows 2.7 times standard. Temperature outside is holding at 42 degrees Celsius. Sarah nodded, her expression calm despite the chaos around her. She had trained for this moment her entire adult life. 23 years in the Colonial Marines, followed by 8 years in the Diplomatic Corps, had prepared her for the impossible task of establishing humanity's first official contact with a galactic power. The fact that the Chthari Empire controlled 7 star systems and commanded the respect of dozens of other species made this mission either humanity's greatest opportunity or its final mistake. The shuttle broke through the worst of the turbulence, and Sarah caught her first glimpse of the Chthari capital city through the viewport. Massive spires of black stone stretched toward the sky like the fingers of buried giants, connected by bridges that seemed to defy gravity. The architecture was brutal and imposing, designed to intimidate rather than inspire. Everything about this world spoke of strength, dominance, and the kind of harsh survival that had forged the Chthari into the galaxy's premier military force. "Beginning final approach to the diplomatic landing pad," Martinez announced. "Chen, you sure about this? We could still turn around." "Tell them our engines malfunctioned." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. After traveling 47 light years? I don't think they'd buy it. She stood and moved to the viewport, studying the landing area below. Hundreds of Chthari warriors lined the platform in perfect formation, their massive forms encased in ceremonial armor that gleamed like black mirrors. Besides, someone asked to take the first step. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thud that belied the violent entry. Sarah could feel the increased gravity immediately, like a heavy blanket trying to pull her toward the deck. Her bones, dense from a lifetime on Earth and strengthened by years of high-gravity training, adapted quickly. The Chthari had no way of knowing that what they considered normal gravity was actually lighter than what she had trained under. "Final systems check," she said, running through her equipment one last time. The translation device clipped to her collar would allow communication, while the diplomatic recorder would capture everything for the folks back home. Her sidearm remained deliberately visible but secured, as per Chthari custom. To hide one's weapons was considered cowardly. To display them openly showed honest intent. The shuttle's ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss, and Sarah Chen stepped onto an alien world for the first time in human history. The air was thick and warm, carrying scents of metal and something that reminded her of burning cedar. The gravity pulled at her with insistent fingers, but her muscles, developed under Earth's punishing conditions and enhanced by years of training in the Sol System's asteroid-belt facilities, held her steady. The Chthari Honor Guard was even more impressive up close. Each warrior stood at least 12 feet tall, their exoskeletons and natural armor that had evolved over millions of years on this harsh world. Their forearms ended in hands that could crush steel, while their elongated skulls housed brains that had conquered star systems through tactical brilliance and overwhelming force. They were apex predators made manifest, the kind of beings that had nightmares about themselves. At the center of the formation stood Warlord Tex, the Chthari's supreme military commander and the being responsible for their expansion across 7 star systems. His exoskeleton was scarred from countless battles, each mark a trophy of victory. When he looked down at Sarah, his compound eyes reflected a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed contempt. "So," Thex said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to emerge from the planet itself, "humanity sends us this small creature to speak for your species." The translation was perfect, but Sarah could hear the dismissal in his tone. "I had expected something more substantial." Sarah kept her expression neutral, though inside she felt the familiar calm that had served her through dozens of combat situations. "Warlord Thex, I am Captain Sarah Chen, representing the United Earth Government and the Colonial Defense Force. We thank you for agreeing to this historic meeting." Thex stepped closer, using his massive height to loom over her. It was a classic intimidation tactic, one that had probably worked on every species he had ever encountered. Sarah had seen similar behavior from drill sergeants, enemy combatants, and overly aggressive alien wildlife. She remained perfectly still, her breathing steady, her heart rate controlled. "Your species intrigues me, small human," Thex continued, beginning to circle her like a predator examining prey. "You emerged from a single world, yet you dare to travel the stars. You have no natural armor, No enhanced strength, no evolutionary advantages. By all rights, you should have been extinct before you discovered fire. The other Crithari warriors watched with what Sarah recognized as anticipation. This was a show, she realized, a demonstration of Crithari superiority for the benefit of their own people as much as for her. Every first contact followed patterns, and this pattern was about establishing dominance before negotiation could begin. Yet here you are, Thex said, completing his circle and stopping directly in front of her, requesting an audience with the Crathari Empire. Seeking what exactly? Trade agreements? Military alliance? Protection from the other powers in this region of space? We seek friendship, Sarah replied simply. Exchange of knowledge, culture, and mutual understanding. Humanity has much to offer, as do the Crithari. Thex's mandibles clicked together in what the translation device identified as laughter. Friendship. How quaint. And what could your soft species possibly offer the Empire that we cannot take for ourselves? Sarah felt the moment approaching like a tide. She had studied every available recording of Crithari first contact with other species, analyzed their behavioral patterns, their social hierarchies, their methods of establishing dominance. In every case, it came down to a physical demonstration. The Crithari respected strength above all else, and they measured strength in the most direct way possible. Perhaps, she said carefully, we could demonstrate rather than simply discuss. Thex's eyes brightened with interest. Demonstrate? Are you challenging the Empire to combat, little human? I'm suggesting that strength takes many forms, Sarah replied, and that assumptions can be dangerous. The warlord's laughter boomed across the landing platform. You would pit yourself against Crithari might? You who stands barely half my height and possesses limbs that look as though they might snap in a strong wind? Sarah maintained her calm expression, though she felt the familiar fire beginning to build in her chest. It was the same fire that had carried her through the blood and chaos of the Centauri Rebellion, through the desperate fighting on Tau Ceti's moons, through every moment when humanity had been told it wasn't strong enough, smart enough, or worthy enough to survive. Physical contact is part of your greeting ritual, is it not? She asked. A grasping of limbs to establish mutual respect? Thex nodded slowly, his massive head tilting as he studied her with new interest. Indeed. Though typically it serves to establish hierarchy rather than respect. He extended one of his forearms, a limb that was larger than Sarah's entire torso. Very well, small human. Let us see what your species considers strength. Sarah looked at the extended arm, at the hand that could crush stone, at the muscles that had never known defeat. Around them, the assembled Crithari warriors leaned forward with anticipation. This was the moment that would define not just first contact, but humanity's entire relationship with the galactic community. She reached out and grasped Thex's wrist. The warlord's grip tightened immediately, applying pressure that would have shattered the bones of every other species he had encountered. Sarah felt the incredible force, felt her bones compress under stress that would have killed most beings in the galaxy, but her bones had been forged in Earth's crushing gravity, strengthened by years of training under conditions that would crush a Crithari warrior. For a moment, they stood locked together, the giant alien warrior applying crushing force to what he saw as a fragile human limb. Sarah's expression never changed, her breathing remained steady, and her grip held firm. She felt Thex's surprise ripple through his massive frame as he realized his strength was having no effect. Then Sarah began to squeeze back. The change in Thex's expression was immediate and profound. Confusion flickered across his alien features as he felt pressure against his exoskeleton, pressure that shouldn't have been possible from such a small creature. Sarah's grip tightened incrementally, applying force that her dense muscles and reinforced bones were designed to generate. Thex tried to pull away, but Sarah's grip held him fast. The warlord's other three arms moved to assist, but Sarah's free hand shot out with lightning speed, grasping his second wrist with the same iron grip. The assembled warriors began to murmur in their alien language, a sound like distant thunder. Impossible, Thex rumbled, his voice no longer carrying its previous confidence. He pulled harder, applying force that could have lifted a ground vehicle, but Sarah held firm. Her muscles, evolved in Earth's punishing environment and trained beyond human limits, locked like steel cables. Sarah began to apply downward pressure, and Warlord Thex, Supreme Commander of the Crithari military forces, Master of 7 star systems and Terror of the Galaxy, began to sink toward his knees. The pressure was relentless, unstoppable, like gravity itself had turned against him. The watching warriors fell silent as their supreme leader, the being they believed to be the strongest in the known galaxy, was forced to his knees by a creature they had dismissed as weak and fragile. Thex's exoskeleton creaked under the pressure, and his breathing became labored as Sarah's grip tightened like a mechanical press. "Your strength is impressive," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying clearly across the silent platform. "But you've never encountered a species that evolved on a death world. You've never faced beings who had to grow strong or die, who had to adapt to crushing gravity and violent weather and predators that made your own world look gentle." Thex looked up at her from his knees, his compound eyes wide with something approaching awe. Around them, the assembled Crithari warriors began to kneel as well, not in defeat, but in recognition of superior strength. "Earth weighs 3 times more than your world," Sarah continued, her grip never wavering. "Our air is thinner, our weather more violent, our predators more cunning. We didn't become the dominant species on our planet because we were the strongest. We became strong because we had to, or we would have died." She released Tex's wrists and stepped back, allowing the warlord to rise slowly to his feet. He stood for a long moment, studying his hands as though seeing them for the first time. When he looked at Sarah again, his expression had changed completely. "Forgive me, Sarah Chen of Earth," he said, and his voice carried a new tone of respect. "I have made the error that has destroyed countless civilizations. I assumed that physical appearance determined capability." Sarah nodded. "It's a common mistake, one that species throughout the galaxy have made about humanity. We're here to change that perception." Dex straightened to his full height, but now it seemed less like intimidation and more like acknowledgement. "Indeed. It seems the galaxy has much to learn about your people." He gestured toward the towering spires of the capital city. "Come, let us begin these negotiations properly. I suspect this will be a very different conversation than I had anticipated." As they walked toward the city, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. First contact was always about making impressions, and humanity had just made one that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The real work was just beginning. The great hall of the Crithari Empire stretched before Sarah like the interior of a mountain that had been hollowed out by gods. Massive columns of black stone rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow, while banners depicting the conquests of 7 star systems hung like frozen waterfalls of victory. The air hummed with the presence of power, not just political but physical, as hundreds of Crithari warriors lined the walls in silent observation. Sarah walked beside Warlord Thex across the polished floor, her boots clicking against stone that had witnessed the submission of dozens of alien species. The gravity here felt even heavier, as though the weight of the Empire itself pressed down upon all who entered. But Sarah moved with the same steady confidence she had displayed on the landing platform. Her body adapted to pressures that would crush most galactic civilizations. "The High Council awaits," Thex explained as they approached a raised dais at the far end of the hall. 5 members represent the 5 pillars of Crithari society: war, industry, science, culture, and expansion. They will determine whether humanity is worthy of formal recognition. Sarah studied the 5 massive figures seated on thrones that looked like they had been carved from asteroids. Each Crithari was unique in their own way, bearing the scars and modifications that marked their respective specializations. The science representative had additional cybernetic implants that glowed with soft blue light. The industry member showed the wear patterns of someone who had spent time in manufacturing facilities. The culture representative bore ceremonial tattoos that covered their exoskeleton in intricate patterns. But it was the war representative that caught Sarah's attention. Even larger than Thex, this Crithari bore scars that spoke of battles across multiple star systems. When their compound eyes fixed on Sarah, she felt the weight of a predator's gaze, a being who had never met anything stronger than themselves. "High Council," Thex announced, his voice echoing in the vast space. "I present Captain Sarah Chen of the species known as Humanity, representative of the United Earth Government." The culture representative leaned forward, their voice carrying melodic tones that somehow survived translation. "We have reviewed the preliminary data on this species. They show promise in artistic expression and technological innovation, but their physical parameters suggest significant limitations. Indeed," added the science representative, their cybernetic implants flickering as they accessed data files. "Average height 1.7 meters, mass 65 kilograms, single heart, bilateral symmetry. By all measurements, they should be classified as a minor species suitable for protectorate status at best." Sarah felt the familiar calm settling over her, the same state of mind that had served her through countless briefings where humanity was dismissed, underestimated, or categorized as insignificant. She had learned long ago that actions spoke louder than statistics. The war representative, introduced as General Krex, rose slowly from their throne. They stood nearly 15 feet tall, their exoskeleton bearing the deep scars of plasma weapons and the bite marks of creatures that no longer existed. Warlord Thex, you seem unusually subdued. Did this first contact not proceed as expected? Thex glanced at Sarah, and she caught something in his expression that might have been embarrassment. The encounter was educational, General. Perhaps more so than anticipated. Educational? Krex descended the dais with steps that shook the floor. In what way could contact with such an obviously inferior species be educational? They stopped directly in front of Sarah, using their massive height to loom over her just as Thex had done. Look at this creature. No natural armor, no enhanced strength, no evolutionary advantages. They are prey animals that learn to use tools. Sarah looked up at the towering figure without flinching. General Krex, I understand your skepticism. The galaxy has taught you that physical appearance indicates capability. But perhaps that teaching has been incomplete. Krex's mandibles clicked with amusement. Incomplete? Child, I have conquered 17 different species across multiple star systems. I have personally fought and defeated champions of races you could not imagine. I have never encountered a being that could match Krithari's strength. Never? Sarah asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the hall, the assembled warriors began to pay closer attention. This was the moment Sarah had been preparing for, the inevitable test that would determine humanity's place in the galactic order. You doubt this? Krex asked, their voice carrying dangerous undertones. I'm suggesting that the galaxy is larger and more diverse than any single species can fully comprehend, Sarah replied. And that strength itself may be more complex than we initially believe. General Krex laughed, a sound like boulders grinding together. Very well, small human. If you believe your species possesses strength worth recognizing, demonstrate it. Face me in the Circle of Dominance. Sarah had read about the Circle of Dominance during her preparation for this mission. It was a Krithari tradition used to establish hierarchy when words failed. Two beings would engage in direct physical contest, testing strength, speed, and endurance until one proved superior. For the Krithari, it was the ultimate arbiter of worth. Sarah, Thex said quietly, moving closer to her, you do not understand what you are agreeing to. General Krex has never been defeated in the Circle. They have faced the champions of species with natural advantages you cannot imagine. To accept this challenge is suicide. Sarah looked up at him and smiled. Thex, with respect, you don't understand what humanity represents. We didn't reach the stars by avoiding challenges. The hall erupted into activity as word of the challenge spread. Warriors who had been standing at attention began to form a circle in the center of the vast space, creating an arena roughly 30 meters in diameter. The High Council descended from their dais to observe their massive forms radiating anticipation. General Krex began removing their ceremonial armor, revealing an exoskeleton that bore the accumulated scars of 1,000 battles. Each mark told a story of victory, of another species champion defeated, of another world's strongest warrior brought low. When they flexed their 4 massive arms, muscles rippled beneath natural armor that had deflected plasma bolts and energy weapons. Last chance to withdraw, little human, Krex said as they entered the circle. I have no desire to kill you unnecessarily, but the circle demands completion once begun. Sarah removed her diplomatic jacket and utility belt, revealing the compact but powerful frame beneath. To the watching Krithari, she looked impossibly fragile, like a child preparing to face a machine of war. But Sarah felt the familiar loosening of her muscles as she prepared for combat, the readiness that came from years of training under conditions that would have killed most galactic species. I appreciate your concern, General, she replied, stepping into the circle. But I think you'll find this more challenging than you expect. The rules of the Circle of Dominance were simple. 2 beings would engage in unarmed combat until one was unable to continue or acknowledge defeat. No weapons, no armor, no external assistance. Pure physical capability would determine the victor. General Krex moved to the center of the circle with the confidence of a being who had never known defeat. Their massive frame cast a shadow that covered nearly half the arena, while their 4 arms positioned themselves for optimal striking angles. They had studied the anatomy of hundreds of species, learned the weak points and vulnerable areas of every type of being they might encounter in combat. Sarah moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent decades learning how to fight in impossible conditions. Her training had included zero-gravity combat, high-pressure underwater operations, and survival in gravitational fields that would crush most beings. Every muscle in her body had been forged under pressures that the galaxy had never imagined possible. Begin! called the culture representative, and General Krex immediately launched forward with speed that should have been impossible for something so large. Sarah moved. The watching Crithari expected to see their champion's massive hands close around the small human, expected to witness another demonstration of their species' overwhelming superiority. Instead, they saw something that challenged everything they thought they knew about physics. Sarah slipped aside from Krex's initial rush with movements that seemed to ignore the heavy gravity of their world. Her muscles, dense from Earth's crushing environment, responded with explosive power that caught the general completely off guard. As the massive warrior's momentum carried them past her position, Sarah's hand shot out and grasped one of Krex's forearms. The general tried to use their superior mass and strength to break free, but found their arm held fast by a grip that seemed to defy possibility. Sarah's bones, compressed and strengthened by a lifetime under Earth's punishing gravity, held firm against forces that should have shattered them. Krex spun around, bringing their other 3 arms to bear, but Sarah was no longer where they expected her to be. She had used the general's own momentum to position herself at their side, where her compact frame became an advantage rather than a liability. Her free hand struck out at pressure points that her military training had taught her to identify, targeting nerve clusters that existed in most humanoid species. The massive warrior staggered as foreign sensations shot through their nervous system. No being had ever moved fast enough to strike them accurately, had ever possessed the strength to hold their limbs immobile while delivering precise attacks. Krex's exoskeleton, which had deflected energy weapons and crushing blows. Impossible, Krex rumbled, trying to bring their superior reach to bear, but Sarah moved like liquid lightning, never staying in one place long enough for the massive arms to find her. She used the general's own size against them, treating their bulk as an obstacle course rather than an overwhelming advantage. Sarah jumped, her powerful legs launching her higher than should have been possible in the heavy gravity. For a moment she seemed to hang in the air above Krex's shoulder, and then her arm wrapped around the general's thick neck. The watching Crithari gasped as they saw their supreme warrior suddenly bearing the weight of a being who should not have possessed the strength to maintain such a position. Krex reached up with all 4 arms to dislodge her, but Sarah had already shifted position again. She used the general's attempts to grab her as stepping stones, bouncing from one massive limb to another while applying pressure to nerve clusters and joint connections that her training had taught her to exploit. The general spun in circles, trying to track the human who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Each time they thought they had her cornered, Sarah would slip away and strike at another vulnerable point. Slowly, incrementally, the accumulated effect of her attacks began to take their toll. General Krex, champion of 17 conquered species, master of 7 star systems, supreme warrior of the Crithari Empire, began to slow down. "What are you?" Krex gasped as Sarah evaded another massive swing and delivered a precise strike to a nerve cluster behind their left shoulder. The entire arm went momentarily numb, hanging uselessly at their side. "I'm a human being," Sarah replied, her breathing still controlled despite the intense activity. "I'm a member of a species that learned to fight on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We grew strong not because we wanted to, but because we had to." She moved again, this time grasping one of Krex's remaining functional arms and using it as an anchor point to swing around behind the massive warrior. Her legs wrapped around the general's torso while her arms found purchase on their neck. It was a position that should have been impossible to maintain against such a powerful opponent, but Sarah's muscles held firm like biological steel cables. "We didn't become apex predators because we were the biggest or the strongest," Sarah continued, applying steady pressure that began to restrict the general's breathing. "We became apex predators because we learned to think, to adapt, to use every advantage our environment gave us." Krex reached back desperately, trying to dislodge the small human who had somehow gained a dominant position against impossible odds. But Sarah's grip was absolute, her positioning perfect, her leverage calculated with the precision of someone who had spent years learning to fight beings much larger than herself. "Our gravity is crushing, our weather is violent, our predators are cunning," Sarah said, her voice calm despite the physical demands of the position. "Every human you meet has survived conditions that would kill most galactic species before they reached adulthood. We are not weak, General. We are survivors." General Krex felt consciousness beginning to slip away as the small human's grip tightened around their neck. For the first time in their life, they were facing defeat. For the first time, they were encountering strength that surpassed their own. "I yield," Krex whispered, the words barely audible in the vast hall. Sarah immediately released her grip and dropped lightly to the floor. General Krex swayed for a moment, then slowly turned to face her. When their compound eyes met hers, she saw something she had not expected. Respect. "I have been a fool," the general said. their voice carrying clearly across the silent hall. "I have made the same error that destroyed the civilizations I conquered. I measured strength by size, power by appearance, worth by familiar standards." They slowly lowered themselves to one knee, a gesture that sent shockwaves through the assembled Krathari warriors. "I acknowledge the strength of humanity. I acknowledge that there are forces in the galaxy I have not yet encountered." Around the hall, hundreds of Krathari warriors began to kneel as well. The High Council exchanged glances that spoke of entire worldviews being reconsidered. Sarah had not just defeated their supreme warrior, she had shattered their understanding of what strength meant in a galaxy full of diverse species. "Rise, General Krex," Sarah said, extending her hand to help the massive warrior to their feet. This was not about dominance. This was about understanding. "Your strength is real and impressive, but strength takes many forms, and the galaxy is large enough for all of them." As Krex rose to their feet, assisted by the small human they had tried to crush moments before, something fundamental shifted in the great hall of the Krathari Empire. The age of assumptions was ending, and the age of understanding was about to begin. The council chambers of the Krathari High Command felt different now. The same massive stone walls still rose toward the shadowed ceiling. The same banners of conquest still hung in silent testimony to empire, but the atmosphere had transformed completely. Where once there had been casual dismissal of humanity's worth, now there was careful attention to every word Sarah spoke. General Krex stood beside their throne rather than sitting upon it, a gesture that had not gone unnoticed by the other council members. The Supreme Military Commander of 7 star systems bore no visible shame at their defeat, but their entire bearing had changed. They watched Sarah with the focused attention of a being who had learned that assumptions could be deadly. "The question before us now," said the industry representative, their voice carrying the measured tones of someone accustomed to calculating resources and capabilities, "is not whether humanity possesses unexpected strengths, but what those strengths mean for the Empire's future." Sarah sat in a chair that had been quickly modified to accommodate her smaller frame, though she suspected the gesture was more about hospitality than necessity. She had spent enough time in diplomatic situations to recognize when the balance of power had shifted, and the events in the circle of dominance had clearly altered the Krathari perspective on human worth. "What we offer," Sarah said, addressing the assembled council, "is partnership based on mutual respect and complementary capabilities. Humanity has developed technologies and techniques born from the necessity of surviving on a world that most galactic species would consider uninhabitable." The science representative leaned forward, their cybernetic implants flickering with increased activity. "Tell us about this world of yours." "Our preliminary scans suggested Earth fell within normal parameters for life-supporting planets." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Your scans were measuring basic atmospheric composition and temperature ranges. They couldn't capture what it actually means to evolve on Earth." She stood and moved to the center of the chamber where a holographic display system waited for activation. "May I demonstrate?" The culture representative gestured with one massive arm. "Proceed. We find ourselves curious about human capabilities." Sarah activated the display, and suddenly the chamber filled with images of Earth in all its violent beauty. Massive storm systems that covered continents, mountain ranges that dwarfed anything on Krathari Prime, oceans whose depths remained largely unexplored even by humanity itself. "Earth's gravity is 3 times that of your home world," Sarah began, watching the council members' expressions as they absorbed this information. "Every step a human takes, every breath we draw, every motion we make happens under crushing pressure that would kill most galactic species within hours." The images shifted to show Earth's predators, great white sharks that could bite through steel, polar bears that hunted in temperatures that would freeze Krathari blood solid, big cats whose reflexes operated faster than most beings could even perceive. "We didn't become Earth's dominant species because we were the strongest or fastest," Sarah continued. "We became dominant because we learned to outthink everything that was trying to kill us. Every human you meet is descended from beings who had to be smarter than creatures that could tear them apart with ease." General Krex spoke for the first time since the challenge had ended. "Your physical density, your reflexes, your strength-to-weight ratio, all products of this environment?" "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "But more than that, we learned to work together because individual strength wasn't enough. We developed technology because our natural abilities weren't sufficient. We became adaptable because our world kept changing in ways that demanded constant evolution." The holographic display showed human cities rising from environments that seemed impossible, settlements in deserts that reached temperatures that would melt Krathari exoskeletons. Research stations in polar regions where the cold would shatter most materials, underwater installations in ocean depths that created pressures exceeding anything the galactic community had imagined possible. Remarkable, murmured the science representative. Your species has not merely survived extreme conditions, but thrived in them. Which brings us to the practical implications, added the industry representative. What can humanity offer the Empire that we cannot achieve ourselves? Sarah had been waiting for this question. We can teach you to survive in environments you've never imagined. We can show you technologies developed under pressures that have never existed elsewhere in the galaxy. We can demonstrate approaches to problems that no other species would think to attempt. She manipulated the holographic display again, this time showing human engineering projects. Space elevators that operated in gravitational fields that would tear apart most galactic structures. Mining operations in asteroids whose composition would corrode Crithari equipment within hours. Terraforming projects on worlds so hostile that other species had written them off as uninhabitable. But more importantly, Sarah continued, we can offer you perspective. The Crithari Empire has grown through conquest, through demonstrating superior strength to species that understood strength in familiar terms. But what happens when you encounter a threat that doesn't fit those parameters? The war representative shifted uncomfortably. What type of threat are you suggesting? Sarah gestured toward the display, which now showed the broader, galactic map with known and theoretical threats highlighted. Environmental disasters that can't be fought with armies. Technological challenges that require innovation rather than brute force. Diplomatic situations where strength alone creates more problems than it solves. She paused, letting the implications settle. The galaxy is vast, and humanity has learned that survival often requires capabilities that go beyond raw power. The expansion representative, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. You suggest that humanity could serve as consultants for situations requiring unconventional approaches? I suggest that humanity could serve as partners, Sarah corrected. We bring unique capabilities to the table, just as the Crithari bring their own strengths. Combined, we could accomplish things that neither species could achieve alone. General Crux stepped forward, their massive frame imposing even in the context of respectful dialogue. You speak of partnership, but the galaxy operates on hierarchies. Strong species lead, weaker species follow. How do we integrate a species that challenges those assumptions? Sarah met the general's gaze directly. By recognizing that strength itself is more complex than we initially understood. The Crithari are masters of direct confrontation, of overwhelming force applied precisely where it will have maximum effect. Humanity has learned to achieve objectives through indirect means, through adaptation and innovation and persistence. The holographic display shifted again, showing comparative scenarios. Crithari forces achieving military objectives through superior firepower and tactical brilliance, while human forces accomplish similar goals through stealth, environmental manipulation, and technologies designed for situations where direct confrontation was inviable. Different tools for different problems, Sarah explained. The Empire has conquered 7 star systems by being the strongest force in direct conflict. But expansion beyond that may require different approaches, different solutions to challenges that can't be resolved through conventional warfare. The science representative's implants flickered rapidly as they processed the implications. You're suggesting that continued expansion will eventually encounter problems that require human-style solutions. I'm suggesting that the galaxy is larger and more diverse than any single approach can handle, Sarah replied. The Crithari method has been incredibly successful, but success often requires adapting to new circumstances. The culture representative spoke next, their melodic voice carrying thoughtful tones. There is wisdom in this perspective. Our legends speak of civilizations that grew too rigid in their methods, too dependent on familiar strengths. They eventually encountered challenges their traditional approaches could not overcome. And they fell, added the industry representative grimly. Not to superior enemies, but to problems they could not solve with the tools they understood. A long silence settled over the chamber as the council members absorbed the implications of what Sarah was proposing. She could see them wrestling with concepts that challenged everything they had believed about strength, hierarchy, and the nature of galactic civilization. Finally, the war representative spoke again. Assuming we accept this partnership concept, what would be the practical arrangements? How would human capabilities be integrated with Crithari operations? Sarah had prepared for this moment through months of study and consultation with Earth's best military and diplomatic minds. Joint operations where human and Crithari forces work together, each contributing their unique strengths. Technology sharing that combines Crithari engineering excellence with human innovation. Training exchanges where our species learn from each other's methods. And command structure? General Crux asked pointedly. Situational command based on expertise, Sarah replied without hesitation. If the mission requires direct military confrontation, Crithari experience leads. If it requires unconventional approaches or extreme environment operations, human experience leads. The goal is successful completion, not ego satisfaction. The general's mandibles clicked with what the translation device identified as thoughtful consideration. You would place human officers in command of Crathari forces? I would place the most qualified officers in command regardless of species, Sarah corrected, just as I would expect Crathari officers to command human forces when their expertise was most relevant to mission success. Sarah could sense the weight of decision settling over the council members, the recognition that they were discussing changes that would affect the structure of their empire for generations to come. The High Council members exchanged glances that spoke of private communications through technological means humans couldn't intercept. Finally, the culture representative spoke for the group. This proposal requires consideration beyond what can be accomplished in a single session. However, we find merit in your arguments and respect for your species' capabilities has been established. General Krex stepped forward again. I propose a trial period. Joint operations on a limited scale to test the compatibility of our methods and evaluate the effectiveness of combined approaches. The science representative nodded agreement. Research partnerships as well. Human techniques applied to Crathari problems, and vice versa. The potential for advancement is significant. Very well, said the war representative, speaking for the entire council. We will establish a formal alliance between the Crathari Empire and the United Earth Government. Terms to be negotiated based on demonstrated results rather than theoretical assumptions. Sarah felt a wave of relief and accomplishment wash over her. The mission that had seemed impossible when she left Earth was succeeding beyond their most optimistic projections. Humanity would not merely gain recognition from a major galactic power, they would establish a partnership that could reshape their species' future among the stars. There is one condition, General Krex added, and Sarah tensed slightly. Human representatives to the Empire must possess the same capabilities you have demonstrated. We will not accept partnerships with beings who cannot earn our respect through proven strength. Sarah smiled. General, I think you'll find that every human you meet has been shaped by the same forces that shaped me. We don't produce weak individuals because our world doesn't allow them to survive. As the formal ceremonies began and the first alliance between humanity and a major galactic power took shape, Sarah reflected on how far they had come from that moment of first contact on the landing platform. The galaxy was about to learn that strength came in many forms, and humanity was ready to demonstrate just how strong survivors could become. 3 months after the historic alliance agreement was signed, the first joint operation between humanity and the Crathari Empire faced its ultimate test. The mission briefing chamber aboard the Crathari dreadnought Worldbreaker hummed with tension as species that had never worked together prepared to face a challenge that neither could handle alone. Commander Sarah Chen, now bearing the dual rank insignia of both the Colonial Defense Force and the Crathari Empire, studied the tactical displays with growing concern. What had started as a routine patrol mission in the contested Vega Proxima system had become something far more dangerous when long-range sensors detected the impossible, a Void Reaper scout ship. The Void Reapers haven't been seen in this sector for over 300 years, reported General Krex, their massive form dwarfing the human officers who stood beside them at the tactical table. According to our historical records, they were driven beyond the Galactic Rim after the Great Coalition Wars. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, Sarah's second-in-command and one of the 12 humans assigned to the joint operation, highlighted key points on the display with practiced efficiency. The ship appears to be conducting systematic scans of inhabited systems. Pattern analysis suggests they're gathering intelligence for a larger force. The Void Reapers were the galaxy's nightmare scenario made manifest. A species that had evolved in the empty space between galaxies, feeding on energy sources that other civilizations required for survival. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything the galactic community possessed, and their methods were brutally efficient. When Void Reapers moved into a region, entire star systems went dark. Standard Crathari tactics would be to mass our fleet strength and engage with overwhelming force, General Krex continued, their scarred exoskeleton reflecting the tactical display's glow. However, Void Reaper sensor technology would detect our approach long before we could achieve effective range. Sarah nodded, understanding the dilemma. The Crathari had built their empire through direct confrontation, using superior firepower to overwhelm their opponents. But the Void Reapers had technology that made conventional warfare suicidal. Any large fleet movement would be detected, tracked, and eliminated before it could engage. What do we know about their weaknesses? Asked Captain Torres, the human engineering specialist who had been studying Void Reaper technology since the first sensor contacts. The ship's tactical AI, a hybrid system combining Crithari military databases with human adaptive algorithms, displayed historical engagement records. Void Reaper technology is optimized for deep space operations and energy-based warfare. They have limited experience with physical-based attacks and environmental warfare. Sarah felt a familiar tingle of recognition, the same sensation she had experienced when facing General Krex in the Circle of Dominance. Once again, she was looking at a problem that required thinking beyond conventional parameters. "Show me the target system's stellar cartography," she requested. The display shifted to show Vega Proxima in detail. A young star system with 3 gas giants, multiple asteroid fields, and the kind of gravitational anomalies that made navigation challenging for most species. It was exactly the type of environment that would give human forces an advantage. "The Void Reaper ship is stationed near the outer gas giant," Webb observed, highlighting the enemy position. "They're using its gravitational field to mask their emissions while they conduct their scans." "Smart positioning," Sarah admitted. "But they're thinking like deep space operators. They're not considering environmental factors that planet-bound species take for granted." General Krex's compound eyes focused on Sarah with the intensity she had come to recognize as Crithari concentration. "You have an approach in mind?" "I have several," Sarah replied, manipulating the display to show the asteroid fields that riddled the inner system. "But they all depend on combining Crithari's strength with human adaptability." The plan she outlined over the next hour challenged every assumption both species held about space warfare. Instead of massing forces for direct confrontation, small teams would infiltrate the system using the asteroid fields as cover. Human stealth technology would mask their approach, while Crithari engineering would provide the raw power needed for the final assault. "You propose to use the asteroids themselves as weapons?" asked Commander Zex, the Crithari tactical specialist assigned to the joint operation. "I propose to use the entire environment as our ally," Sarah corrected. "The Void Reapers are optimized for clean, energy-based engagements in empty space. They're not prepared for physical warfare in a cluttered, dynamic environment. The human contingent would pilot specially modified Crithari attack craft through the asteroid field using their enhanced reflexes and spatial awareness to navigate hazards that would destroy conventional forces. Meanwhile, Crithari engineering teams would position massive chunks of asteroid material in carefully calculated orbits around the gas giant. When the Void Reaper ship attempts to escape," Webb explained, taking over the briefing, "it will find itself trapped in a closing sphere of physical projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed." General Krex studied the tactical projection for long moments. "They're massive brain-processing variables that lesser beings couldn't even comprehend. The coordination required would be extraordinary. The timing must be perfect, or the Void Reapers will simply destroy the incoming asteroids and escape, which is where Crithari precision combines with human improvisation," Sarah said. "Your people can calculate exact trajectories and timing. My people can adapt when things don't go according to plan. The mission launch 12 hours later represented everything the alliance between their species could accomplish. Crithari dreadnoughts provided the raw power to accelerate massive asteroids to combat velocities, while human pilots guided smaller craft through navigation hazards that would have been impossible for any other species to survive." Sarah found herself at the controls of a modified Crithari interceptor, its massive frame adapted to accommodate human physiology while maintaining the brutal acceleration capabilities that made it deadly in combat. Beside her, Lieutenant Torres monitored the stealth systems that kept them invisible to Void Reaper sensors. "Asteroid field entry in 30 seconds, Torres reported, their voice calm despite the crushing forces that surrounded them. The interceptor was pulling acceleration that would have liquefied most galactic species, but human bone density and muscle structure adapted from Earth's harsh environment allowed them to remain functional. Through the tactical link, Sarah could hear the coordination between human and Crithari teams throughout the operation. Commander Webb was guiding a second interceptor through a different asteroid field approach vector, while Crithari engineering teams positioned massive chunks of stone and metal with precision that defied belief. "Contact," Sarah announced as her sensors detected the Void Reaper scout ship. The alien vessel hung in space like a piece of living shadow, its hull absorbing energy across multiple spectra, while exotic radiation patterns indicated technology that operated on principles the galactic community barely understood. The Void Reaper ship was everything the intelligence reports had suggested: sleek, deadly, and utterly alien. Its design spoke of evolution in environments where matter was scarce and energy was the primary medium of interaction. Seeing it firsthand, Sarah understood why conventional fleets had failed against these beings. "All units execute Phase 1, Sarah transmitted, and the carefully orchestrated dance began. Human-piloted interceptors began herding the Void Reaper ship using carefully calculated harassment attacks, never staying in one position long enough to be targeted effectively. The alien vessel responded exactly as predicted, attempting to withdraw toward the system's edge where it could bring its superior technology to bear. But as it moved, Crithari engineering precision became apparent. Massive asteroids accelerated to incredible velocities by the Empire's most powerful engines began converging on the Void Reaper's escape route. The trap was closing with mathematical certainty. The alien ship's sensors finally detected the incoming physical projectiles, but by then it was too late. Void Reaper technology was optimized for energy warfare and deep space maneuvering. Faced with massive chunks of matter moving at relativistic speeds, their options became limited. They're attempting to vaporize the asteroids, Torres reported, watching energy discharges that could have powered small civilizations tear into the incoming projectiles. Let them, Sarah replied grimly. That's what we're counting on. The Void Reaper ship's energy weapons were indeed powerful enough to destroy the asteroids, but the physics of the situation worked against them. When massive objects moving at significant fractions of light speed were suddenly vaporized, they created clouds of superheated plasma and debris that were just as dangerous as the original projectiles. The alien vessel found itself trapped in an expanding sphere of destruction that no amount of advanced technology could simply ignore. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a Void Reaper ship was forced into a position where escape was impossible. Phase 2 execute, Sarah transmitted, and the human interceptors began their final approach. What followed was unlike any engagement in recorded military history. Human pilots, their reflexes enhanced by evolution on a death world, navigated through the chaos of vaporized asteroids and exotic energy discharges that would have been instantly fatal to any other species. They used the environment itself as cover, hiding behind chunks of superheated debris while delivering precision strikes against specific subsystems. The Void Reaper ship, designed for clean energy warfare in empty space, found itself unable to effectively target opponents who moved through three-dimensional debris fields with impossible precision. Every time its weapons locked onto a human interceptor, the target would disappear behind another piece of wreckage, only to emerge from an unexpected angle. Hull breach detected on the enemy vessel, Webb reported, his interceptor dancing through a field of plasma that should have been instantly lethal. They're losing atmosphere. Sarah felt a moment of savage satisfaction as she delivered another precision strike to the Void Reaper ship's sensor array. For centuries, these beings had terrorized the galaxy through technological superiority, but technology alone wasn't enough when facing opponents who had learned to fight in environments that made technology secondary to pure survival instinct. Enemy vessel is attempting emergency jump, Torres announced, monitoring exotic energy patterns that indicated faster-than-light drive activation. Not if I can help it, Sarah replied, adjusting her interceptor's course toward the Void Reaper ship's drive section. What she did next would have been impossible for any pilot not trained in Earth's crushing gravity and chaotic weather systems. Sarah guided her ship through a gap in the wreckage field that was barely larger than her interceptor, emerging within point-blank range of the alien vessel's primary drive systems. The torpedo she fired wasn't exotic or technologically advanced. It was a simple kinetic projectile, the kind of weapon that most galactic civilizations had abandoned centuries ago in favor of energy-based systems. But when it struck the Void Reaper ship's drive section at close range, the alien vessel's advanced technology became a liability. The explosion that followed lit up the entire star system as exotic matter containment fields collapsed and energy systems designed for impossible efficiency released their stored power all at once. The Void Reaper scout ship, technological marvel of a species from beyond the galactic rim, died in a blast of light that would be visible for years. In the aftermath, as human and Crithari forces regrouped and assessed the results of their first joint operation, something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. The Void Reapers were no longer invincible. The combination of Crithari precision and human adaptability had found a way to defeat technology that had seemed unstoppable. Mission success, Sarah reported to General Krex as their forces began the journey back to Crithari space. Enemy vessel destroyed, intelligence gathered, no allied casualties. But both of them knew the real success was deeper than tactical victory. They had proven that the alliance between their species could accomplish things that neither could achieve alone. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place. 1 year after the Vega Proxima incident, the Galactic Council chambers on neutral Andorian Station buzzed with an energy that hadn't been felt in centuries. Representatives from 47 different species filled the vast amphitheater, their various forms and technologies creating a tapestry of galactic diversity that spoke to millions of years of evolution across thousands of worlds. But today all attention was focused on the central platform where two figures stood together, Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Government and Supreme Warlord Thex of the Crithari Empire. Their presence together represented more than just an alliance between two species. It represented a fundamental shift in how the galaxy understood strength, cooperation, and survival. The debate had been raging for 3 standard days. News of the joint victory against the Void Reapers had spread through galactic civilization like wildfire, challenging assumptions that had governed interstellar relations for millennia. Some species saw opportunity in the new paradigm. Others saw threat. The traditional order has served the galaxy well for over 10,000 years, declared Ambassador Vex of the Hegemony Alliance, their crystalline form pulsing with agitation. Strong species lead, weaker species follow, and stability is maintained through understood hierarchies. This human-Crathary alliance threatens to undermine everything. Sarah stood and addressed the assembly, her voice carrying clearly through translation systems that rendered her words in dozens of languages. Ambassador Vex, with respect, the traditional order has also left the galaxy vulnerable to threats it couldn't handle. The Void Reapers were defeated not because we overthrew hierarchy, but because we recognized that different challenges require different solutions. The hegemony representative's crystalline structure flared brighter. And what happens when these different solutions spread? When every minor species begins to believe they possess hidden strengths that entitle them to equal standing with their betters, then perhaps, Warlord Thex interjected, their massive form rising from the platform, the galaxy becomes stronger rather than more divided. The Crathari had been the strongest supporters of traditional hierarchy, their empire built on the principle that might determine right. To hear their supreme military commander suggest alternative approaches was unprecedented. The Crathari Empire has prospered through strength, Thex continued, but we have learned that strength itself is more complex than we understood. When we judge others by familiar standards alone, we blind ourselves to capabilities that could benefit everyone. Ambassador Quinn of the Merchant Coalition leaned forward, their tentacled form shifting with interest. Are you suggesting that the Empire is prepared to renegotiate existing treaties based on these new understandings? Sarah exchanged a glance with Thex before answering. This was the moment they had prepared for, the question that would determine whether their alliance would remain an isolated partnership or become the foundation for broader change. We are suggesting that the galaxy would benefit from a more flexible approach to interspecies cooperation, Sarah replied. The Human Crathari Joint Command has identified at least 17 ongoing situations where conventional approaches have failed, but where combined methods might succeed. The holographic display at the center of the chamber activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with problem areas highlighted in red, abandoned sectors where Void Reaper incursions had made exploration impossible. Trade routes blocked by gravitational anomalies that no single species possessed the technology to navigate. Research stations studying phenomena that required capabilities no civilization had developed. The Nexus Barriers, breathed Representative Zara of the Explorers Guild, identifying one of the highlighted regions. You believe you can breach the Nexus Barriers? The Nexus Barriers were a gravitational maze surrounding one of the galaxy's most ancient star systems, a region where space itself was twisted into configurations that destroyed any ship attempting to navigate them. For 3,000 years, the barriers had protected secrets that predated most galactic civilizations. Human pilots with Crathari engineering support, Thex confirmed. Our preliminary simulations suggest a 93% probability of successful navigation. The implications sent another wave of discussion through the assembly. The Nexus Barriers were legendary, the kind of obstacle that defined the limits of galactic exploration. If the Human Crathari Alliance could breach them, it would demonstrate capabilities that went beyond anything previously imagined. And in return for these demonstrations, asked Ambassador Vex suspiciously, what do humanity and the Crathari Empire expect? Sarah had anticipated this question. Every species in the galaxy understood that no one offered solutions without expecting compensation. The challenge was convincing them that the compensation being sought was genuinely mutual benefit rather than disguised conquest. We expect to learn, Sarah replied simply. Every species in this chamber has developed unique capabilities born from their specific environments and challenges. Humanity and the Crathari have proven that combining different approaches creates possibilities neither could achieve alone. We believe this principle applies to the entire galactic community. She manipulated the holographic display to show a new configuration. A network of cooperative relationships based on complementary capabilities rather than hierarchical dominance. Species working together based on expertise rather than traditional power structures. The aquatic collectives have mastered fluid dynamics in ways that could revolutionize space travel, Sarah continued. The Crystal Communion has developed computational methods that make our best artificial intelligences look primitive. The hive minds have organizational capabilities that could coordinate galactic-scale projects we can't even imagine. But these species have always been considered minor powers, protested Representative Cal of the military supremacist faction. Their worlds are small, their fleets limited, their political influence minimal. Because we've been measuring influence by familiar standards, Thex replied, their voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 7 star systems. When I fought Captain Chen in the Circle of Dominance, I was measuring her strength by Crithari standards. I nearly missed recognizing capabilities that surpassed my own. The debate continued for hours as representatives grappled with concepts that challenged everything they thought they understood about galactic civilization. Some species embraced the possibilities Sarah and Thex were describing. Others saw only chaos and the collapse of order. Finally, Elder Marn of the Ancient Assembly called for formal consideration. As representatives of the oldest continuous civilization in the galaxy, their words carried weight that could sway the entire council. We have observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, Elder Marn began, their aged voice carrying across the chamber through translation systems that had to reach back to linguistic databases thousands of years old. We have seen empires built on strength alone crumble when they encountered challenges their strength couldn't overcome. We have watched species driven to extinction because they could not adapt to changing circumstances. The Elders' form, sustained by technology that predated most galactic governments, moved slowly to the center of the chamber. But we have also seen cooperation create possibilities that no individual species could achieve. The current galactic order has served well, but it is not the only possible order. Sarah felt her heart racing as the ancient being's words were translated. The Ancient Assembly's support could legitimize the changes she and Thex were proposing, or their opposition could doom the Alliance to isolated existence. We propose a trial period, Elder Marn continued. Let the Human Crithari Alliance attempt the challenges they have identified. Let them demonstrate whether their methods can indeed solve problems that have defeated conventional approaches. If they succeed, we will consider broader applications of their cooperative model. The vote that followed was closer than Sarah had hoped, but wider than she had dared expect. 26 species voted in favor of the trial period, 18 opposed and 3 abstained. It wasn't a mandate, but it was permission to prove that the galaxy could change. Over the following months, the joint human Crithari operations exceeded even their own optimistic projections. The nexus barriers fell to navigation techniques that combined human intuition with Crithari precision engineering. Trade routes through gravitational anomalies opened when human adaptability merged with Crithari computational power. Research stations studying exotic phenomena made breakthroughs that had eluded scientific teams for centuries. But more importantly, other species began to take notice. The aquatic collectives offered their fluid dynamics expertise for a joint exploration of gas giant atmospheres. The Crystal Communion proposed computational partnerships that could revolutionize galactic communications. Even some of the minor species that had been dismissed as irrelevant began demonstrating capabilities that complemented the growing alliance. The galaxy was discovering that strength came in more forms than anyone had imagined, and that cooperation could create possibilities beyond the reach of dominance alone. Sarah Chen, who had begun this journey as humanity's first ambassador to an alien empire, found herself at the center of changes that would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. As she stood on the observation deck of the joint command station that now served as headquarters for the growing coalition, watching human and Crithari engineers working alongside representatives from a dozen other species, Sarah reflected on how far they had all come. The moment when Warlord Tex had seized her wrist in what he thought would be a demonstration of dominance had become the foundation for understanding that would echo across the stars. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders that no single species could comprehend alone. But together, working as partners rather than competitors, they were beginning to discover just how far cooperation could take them. The age of isolated strength was ending, and the age of unified possibility was just beginning. In the end, it hadn't been about proving that humanity was stronger than the Crithari, or that any single species was superior to the others. It had been about proving that the galaxy was large enough for everyone to be strong in their own way, and that the greatest strength of all came from recognizing and celebrating those differences. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, full of promise for futures that would be built not through conquest but through understanding. And at the center of it all, the simple truth that Sarah had demonstrated in a moment of crisis: sometimes the smallest gesture can change everything if you know where to apply the pressure.